On a lonely farm in southern Germany in the spring of 1922, 6 people were murdered in a single night. A whole family and their maid killed one by one with a heavy farm tool. But that is not the part that has haunted people for 100 years. The part that haunts them is what happened next. Because for days after the killings, someone went on living at that farm. The animals were fed. Smoke rose from the chimney. Meals were eaten in the kitchen. The murderer had stayed in the house with the dead, and then simply walked away and was never found. This is the Hinterkaifeck murders, perhaps the most chilling unsolved crime in German history. An entire household wiped out on an isolated farm after weeks of strange and frightening warnings, and followed by days of an unseen occupant moving through the rooms. By the end, you will know the signs that something was wrong, the night the family died, the evidence that the killer lingered, and why, a century later, no one has ever been caught. Stay with me. Hinterkaifeck was not even a village. It was a single small farmstead in rural Bavaria, set apart from its neighbors and ringed by dark woods. It was home to the Gruber family. Andreas, the stern old patriarch, his wife, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her 2 young children. They kept to themselves, out at the edge of everything, and the nearby villagers did not much like them. And in the weeks before the murders, the family began to notice that something was wrong. Andreas found footprints in the snow leading from the forest toward the house, but none leading away again. He heard footsteps in the attic above him. A newspaper appeared that no one had bought. A set of house keys went missing. The maid had quit months before, insisting the place was haunted. Andreas told his neighbors all of it, and then he did nothing. This is the detail that chills people the most. Andreas had come to believe that someone was living in his attic. He had heard them moving up there, and yet he never climbed up to look, never fetched the police, never spent a single night away. For days, the family may have been eating and sleeping directly beneath a stranger already inside their home, simply waiting. On the 31st of March, 1922, a new maid arrived at the farm. Her name was Maria. The previous maid had fled months earlier, frightened out of her wits. Maria knew none of this. She walked into Hinterkaifeck to begin her new job, and she would be dead before the night was over. She had arrived on the household's very last day. That evening in the dark it began. One after another, 4 members of the family were drawn out to the barn, perhaps by a sound or a cry for help. And there each was struck down with a mattock, the heavy pick a farmer uses to break soil. Then the killer walked calmly into the house and killed the maid and the youngest child, a boy of 2, in their beds. And then for 4 full days, nothing. The children did not appear at school. Victoria did not come to church. The post went uncollected. Finally, on the 4th of April, a few uneasy neighbors and a repairman made their way out to the remote farm. In the barn, beneath a covering of hay, they found 4 bodies. Inside the house, 2 more. All 6 were dead. But it was the state of the farm that turned the investigators cold. Someone had been there the entire time. The cattle had been fed and watered. A fire had been kept burning in the stove. Food in the kitchen had been cooked and eaten, and neighbors now remembered seeing smoke from the chimney all week. The murderer had wiped out the family and then settled in to live among the bodies in no hurry at all. The case became a national sensation. Police came from Munich and questioned the whole region. The bodies were exhumed and the heads of the victims were sent to the city, where, in desperation, they were shown to clairvoyants in the hope of a vision of the killer. Over the decades, more than 100 suspects would be named and investigated. Not one could ever be firmly tied to the crime. The most obvious motive, robbery, collapsed almost at once. A considerable sum of money was found untouched inside the farmhouse, along with other valuables. Whoever came to Hinterkaifeck that night had not come for money. They had come for the family itself, and that single fact made it far more disturbing than any robbery gone wrong. As they dug into the household, the investigators found something dark at its center. There were long-standing rumors, and even old legal accusations, of incest between Andreas and his widowed daughter. It was quietly believed by some that Victoria's little son had been fathered by her own father. It was a home already wrapped in secrecy and shame, the kind of place that could hide a great many motives and a great many enemies. Then there was Victoria's husband, Karl. He had been declared dead in the First World War, but his body was never actually recovered. And so, for decades, a quiet and terrible theory lingered. That Karl had survived the war, returned home to discover his wife and her father's secret, taken his revenge on the household, and vanished back into the world. It could never be proven or ruled out. Other names drifted through the case over the years. A neighbor with an old grudge, a pair of local brothers, a passing drifter. The file was reopened again and again in the 50s, in the 80s, and as recently as 2007, when a team of modern investigators reportedly arrived at a single most likely suspect. But they chose not to release the name out of respect for relatives still living. And yet the mind always drifts back to the same unbearable image, not the killings themselves, the days that came after. A figure sitting in that warm farmhouse kitchen, feeding the cattle, eating the family's food, tending the stove, while 6 murdered people lay just yards away. Calm, patient, entirely unbothered. What kind of person does that? So lay out what we truly know, that an entire family was slaughtered with a farm tool on a lonely Bavarian farm, that someone stalked them for weeks and then lived among their bodies for days, and that, despite 100 years of investigation, the killer was never named, never charged, never found. The farmhouse was torn down within the year. The case has never been closed. Perhaps that is why Hinterkaifeck will not let us go. It is not only a murder. It is the violation of the one place we believe is safe. Someone was inside their home, in the attic, in the dark, for days, and the family sensed it and could not save themselves. And whoever it was stepped back out into the world and was never seen again. He may well have died of old age, unpunished, the whole secret intact. Footprints that led to the house and never away, a stranger in the attic, a killer who stayed for days and was never caught. Hinterkaifeck has kept its secret for over 100 years and may keep it forever. The next file we open is far older. A single skeleton found deep inside a cave that by every rule should not exist, and that may rewrite the entire story of where we came from. Subscribe so it finds you. This is Black Salt Ledger.